I wanted to say that in the first video I kept saying that I was working with a pattern that went up to size 5, and then I kept saying I was making a size 6. I am making a size 5 for a 6-year-old because the pattern runs a little bit big. Okay, I threw these fabrics in the wash machine and I've ironed them so they're ready to be worked with now. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten the grain on this pattern fabric. To straighten the grain, I'm just pulling on each of the selvages and I'm moving the fabric along as I do this. I do it, a couple of inches at a time. When I'm done straightening this crosswise grain, I'm going to turn it and I'm going to straighten the lengthwise grain. I'm calling this lengthwise because the fabric from the cut-in to the cut-in can be as many yards as you ask for them to cut out. It could be 1 or it could be 10. I'm trying to make sure that my fingers line up directly across from each other. If this finger over here pulls on it, you see it kind of makes a diagonal. I'm trying to get them directly across from each other to straighten this grain. Once I've done this to the entire cross and lengthwise grains, then the fabric is ready to be cut out. The reason why I do this is because when it gets washed, or even just when it gets handled, the grain can get pulled in a diagonal direction, which if it gets cut out while the grain has been misaligned, it can cause the dress or pants or whatever you make to hang incorrectly. I cut this fabric right here on the cut side, and I'm going to just pull this and this up away from each other with my two hands, and that is going to give me a perfectly straight line all the way across. I'm going to do that on both sides so that my fabric is nice and square. This is me getting ready to tear it. This is the opposite side, and I was about to tear it, but I can see that I've already probably torn it before, and because even though it has more fraying, I can see that it is in a perfectly straight line with the grain already. Okay, I folded the fabric in half so I have this nice fold line. I know I just said that I wasn't going to tear this other side because I thought it was perfectly straight, but when I had folded in half, even with double checking, stretching out the grain and the cross grain, I had a difference when I had this side just freshly torn, lined up pretty exact, and then there was like a difference like this. So I did go ahead and I tore it, and now it does line up very nicely. So there's a couple of bumps like this. This, you're gonna get out the bumps by stretching the grain again and by patting, and you're gonna get it as close to perfectly lined up and flat as you can. It's not gonna ever be perfect, but it will make the dress hang nicely. Okay, so back to our directions. I'm going to lay out piece 14. Do you see how it's dotted? That means that is going to be the wrong side of the pattern piece. Here's the right side of the pattern piece where the 14 is written the right direction. The wrong side of the pattern piece, of course, everything will be upside down. I'm going to lay 13 the regular way. My print needs to be folded towards the inside. That's what the shaded part is on the fabric. And then I'll also lay out piece 1 and 15. So I have everything laid out. you can see that I've got this arrow parallel to the, well, you can't see the edges of the fabric unless I pull back this, but I've got it parallel to the selvage. So that's my grain line. I have it parallel to the selvage, which is the lengthwise grain. This is also parallel with the lengthwise grain. And this line of this rectangle is parallel. The piece 14, of which I misplaced the tracing, so I'm using this, but it has this little double arrow thing that points to the edge right here. Whenever you see that, it's a marking that it is supposed to be on the center fold. So this is where I folded the fabric, and it's placed right there on the center fold. Okay, there are two ways to cut out fabric. There's the old-fashioned way, which is to, and this is a perfectly great way to do it if you don't have a rotary cutter and a cutting mat, to pin the pattern to the fabric, and then you will cut just right on the line, perfectly cut it out like that. The way that I am going to do it is with the rotary cutter. I have put down weights, some metal washers. You can use soup cans. You could use clean rocks, whatever you have handy to weigh things down so they don't shift while you're cutting. I'm going to use the rotary cutter and just, so the safety's on right now. I pull it down, and then that lets my blade come be exposed. So the safety pushes that piece of plastic up. So I'll cut this out along the line. This is the smaller rotary cutter. I think it's the 15 millimeter, and it is better for cutting out things that you're going to use to make wearables. There's a larger one that's more popular, and that's used for like really long lines, like maybe with quilting. Now I've got everything cut out along the edges. I'm going to just go in and I am going to mark these notches like this. That's in the seam allowance. Some people, if you're working with maybe a really fancy project like a wedding dress, some people would prefer to, instead of cutting straight along that line, they'd leave space so that you could make a notch outward. But with a children's cotton dress, making a snip in the seam allowance is perfectly acceptable. So I've got that one, and I'll look for all the other ones. On the bodice back, you're going to, and there'll be other places as well, but you're going to have a double notch here, so I'll do two. I'll do one there. I'm going to redo this after I put the camera down, and I'll do another there. And if there were three, I'd do three. I have some wax-free double-faced tracing paper right here. I take it out of the package and I fold it in half back here, and I will slip it underneath all layers, and then I'll slip it in between the pattern and the fabric. So this will make an impression on both of the outside layers. I will take this tool right here, and they have one that's blue that doesn't have this wide neck, but this is one I ordered for something else. You'll take a tool like this. It's it doesn't make a poke through. It just makes a rounded press through, and you will press along the markings. For a circle, you can't really get a circle very good, so I would have just like trying to do like maybe back and forth for some of the circle markings. And actually on the sleeve right here, because I've done so many sleeve insertions, they are recommending by putting these markings that you're going to be looking for on the inside of the seam allowance for these marks, but I prefer to make snips like I would have done if there had been a triangle right here. And I'll do one for here, and I'll do two for right here in the seam allowance to show that this is the bigger circle. And I'll maybe do one right here, but this is I don't have to do anything because I know that that's the fold line. And this is going to be folded in half, and this will be, I'll end up showing all of this to you later, but this will end up being at the top of the sleeve, on the top of your shoulder, and this will be showing me where I'm going to be sewing a piece of thread that's going to kind of pull the fabric together and allow me to ease it into the armhole. You can see the tracing wheel left out a little deposit of yellow. It's not terribly easy to see. I did the other one in red, and that might be a little easier to see. So if the first color you use doesn't show up, you might just try using a different color for the other markings. It really just depends on the color of the fabric. Okay, for these, I just kind of messily went over this one and just made an imprint, and this one I did just an X over the smaller dot. So let's see how it looks. So on this side you can see the X a little bit, and you can see kind of the messy bigger dot, and you can see the X and the messy bigger dot. So pattern makers add a lot of these little markings that you use the tracing wheel and paper to mark on, and it seems like 60% of the time I don't ever use them or need them, and then when I stop marking them, then that's when I'm looking for them, because they reference them in the directions, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd marked that. So I suggest always marking them until you find that you're just not using them, or just always mark them like I try to do. These are the final markings that I made. This is on the tie sash. Again, I did the X's on the smaller one, and I did kind of a big messier mark on the bigger one. This is the end of video 3. I will be cutting out the skirt on video 4.